Okay. All right, I'm going to start again so we have this for the record. So first thing on the agenda is to talk about co-chairs. What we need to do is we need to nominate and then elect co-chairs for the GitOps working group. We are, I'll remind everyone, under the app delivery SIG. So from a process perspective, I will send out an email to the to the SIG app delivery mailing list. We do not have a mailing list specifically for the working group. That's kind of the best practice that has been applied across the different SIGs, is that the working group, the agenda of the working group and what we do is of relevance to the entire SIG. So when it comes to certain communications like nominating and electing co-chairs, that goes to the SIG app delivery mailing list. And then when there's specific things to the working group, we can certainly do that. And that's where we have our own channel in Slack. So I will send out a note to the email to the mailing list, as well as drop it on Slack. What I propose, and I would love to hear if there's any objections. If you have objections, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll assume that my proposed schedule is about right. What I would propose is that we do a 1 week for nominations, and then we do 1 week for voting. The voting, I suggest that I suspect that we, I guess this is one of the areas where if we get more nominations than 3, then we are going to have a vote for, down selecting. I think more than 3 co-chairs is a little bit difficult. But ideally, perhaps what I would suggest is that we maybe through the Slack channel, suggest some folks that we want to nominate. And if it stays, 2 or 3, which would be ideal, then perfect. Then the vote is really just a formality where everybody says, yep, that sounds good. If we end up with more nominations than that, then I guess we'll have to figure out how we down select from that. So I'll pause there and open it up for comments or suggestions. So I was, to summarize, I was suggesting a 1 week nomination period and then a 1 week voting period. And the voting should happen on the app delivery mailing list.
Can you perhaps elaborate just a tad for general reference on what's expected of the co-chairs?
Yes, very good point. What is expected for the co-chairs is really to herd cats, really to keep things moving along. However, it is not a project management position. It is something where, somebody who has some desire to engage and understand at a deeper level what is happening within the different work streams. Also chairing the meetings, acting as, if you will, the spokespersons for the GitOps working group, back to the app delivery SIG, those types of things. It does require some level of time commitment. So we want definitely somebody who can commit some time to make sure that we as an organization, as a group, continue to move forward. I think that's the most important thing. And so committing to move forward is not just herding cats, it is actually engaging and saying, okay, understanding what are the blockers to us moving forward on the website, and helping move these different work streams along.
And just a couple of questions. So Shlomo has a question in the chat, but I'm gonna kind of jump over that question real quick. Self-nominations, good or yay or nay?
Yay, I say yay.
Okay.
How do other folks feel about it? I think self-nominations are fabulous.
I agree, yeah.
Okay. So from a time commitment perspective, I would expect, this is just my gut feeling. I think with the scope that we have ahead of us, it probably means on the order of half a day a week, maybe as much as, and I think it'll be, it'll be cyclical, but half a day to 1 day a week. I certainly don't think it would be more than 1 day a week. Because the chair does not mean that they are doing the work of all the work streams, but the chairs have to have enough of a knowledge of what is happening in the work streams to recognize blockers, recognize when there's connections that need to be made across the work streams, those types of things. It's almost, I almost think of it as kind of a product manager for the work that we're doing. Okay. So everybody okay with we will do 1 week of nominations, and then if we have to during that time, we'll sort out how we do the voting, but the expectation is 1 week for nominations, 1 week for voting. Okay.
Can we get a, let me just record a few people's names here in the notes. So we've got Tony, and I think Omer, and anybody else want to throw their name? All say it's a good idea. I think 2 people.
As a nomination,
Yeah.
add me, please. Yeah, add me to the list.
No, I'm sorry, are these
just
not,
agreeing.
no, these are just agreeing to the
Agreeing that this
protocol.
process.
Ah,
looks
gotcha,
good.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm
Yeah.
good in it as well.
Nominations
Cool.
we'll
All right.
do over the email. So after I send out the email later today, we can do nominations there. And of course, we can also put them in the Slack channel. But official nominations need to go on the mailing list.
Okay.
Okay.
I got a few people from chat too. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, next topic is logo. So I'll bring everybody up to speed and then we can have a discussion around that. So there were 2 parallel efforts going on, maybe 3 in terms of getting a logo for the working group. Amy had the designers from the CNCF work up some designs. And then we had a number of individuals, so maybe it's just 2. We had a number of individuals who were starting to work on that. There is an issue linked in the notes here to an issue in GitHub where some of that discussion has been happening. And so I will point everybody in that direction. I guess the point of discussion today is, do we need to have any discussion live here, or should we just continue the discussion in the GitHub issue? There's some great feedback in there about, do we really want to include the words working group? Or do we want to just have GitOps and not have working group or any other name, just the word GitOps and the logo? So these are some of the things. And officially we should have the discussion. Anything that we discuss here should be pulled back into the discussion, the issue online, so those who can't attend can chime in as well. But I just want to open it up for any discussion that folks might want to have. And hey, Scott, good to see you.
Hey there. Sorry I was late.
No problem.
I think
Definitely
for a wider audience, I think it's good to continue the discussion
Of course.
on the GitHub page, right? The tracking issue. I don't know if. Yeah, I don't think I have an opinion on either initiative or working group or in any other that I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in, but
I think going with GitOps alone might be taking too broad of a position, right? Like we're saying this is the GitOps logo, so kind of like I think it's too general perhaps, and kind of like we might be like stepping beyond boundaries of what the logo is about. Like is the logo for the working group, or is the logo looking to be used as, I don't know, a label in products when they're GitOps compliant, right? I think that the purpose will determine whether we want to be as general. What are we identifying? Is it us as a group, or is it the technology as a pattern? And what's going to be the long-term usage of it? I'm inclined to think that at this point, we are talking about something to represent us as a group, not not as an overarching technology. I'm not sure.
So one point of clarification, and then I do see some hands up, so I'll move over to Shlomo, I'll move over to you, and then to Scott, is that this is the logo not for the working group, but for the project. Remember, we are a sandbox project. So this is the logo for the sandbox project. And so there's a relationship to this discussion around the fact that the name of the project should not be working group, because that working group represents a set of individuals. And that we have this discussion that's also ongoing around what is the name of the project. And so the logo is not for us as a working group, it's a logo for the project. Shlomo?
Yeah, so I have essentially two questions. One is, can we maybe, before we have a big discussion about what the logo should look like, define some sort of criteria for coming to an end of the discussion? Because the logo is obviously something of personal choice, taste, preferences, and maybe people emotional. And I think it would help if we have a clear understanding what's our kind of target quality gate, what do we need to have so that we can make a decision. And I would like to suggest a model, which is, what are we willing to defend? What are we willing to go to war for with other people who are trying to abuse our logo or whatever? And maybe try to find the minimum thing that actually represents that what we're willing to fight for, and leave out anything that we're not willing to fight for. Because if we go too far, too broad, and people will abuse it and we won't be fighting over it, then it would have been kind of bad for us. So I prefer to have a more specific logo, or maybe even a less beautiful, fancy logo, but one that we are willing to defend against abuse or wrong representation.
Can you be more clear? What do you mean by defend against what? Make an example.
Well, let's say we have a logo and some company, let's say GitLab, decided to use this logo as part of their product marketing. Actually representing a version of GitOps, which is the antithesis of how we understand GitOps. And then we have to do something. Otherwise, our working group or project would be kind of drawn into that. And people would start to associate their product, which is not what we believe GitOps should be, with our initiative. And that's a scenario that I see actually as very realistic, as we're close to that scenario, because companies will try to use our initiative to market their products. And not all companies are very much into the details or into really adopting GitOps as we see it to further their product, but they just try to further their product by kind of usurping our logo or our stuff.
But you can't just defend that with pure ugliness, I think. I mean, making it ugly so no one picks it up is not a good idea, I think. But making it a trademark is also not on the table, right? So I'm not sure. I'm not a legal expert.
Let's think about. I would suggest that we think about the kind of logo for Git, right? So there's a few different ways that Git is represented from a picture standpoint floating around the internet. But most of the time it looks like a simple branch or a simple fork, right? And so I think from my standpoint, the principles are the way that we will be defending what is a proper implementation in the view of this community of GitOps and what it is not. I think the logo, especially as an open source group, is going to be tough for us. We're going to have limited capability to defend it. But there's a lot of power in this group and amongst the companies represented here by talking about what and how GitOps works in practice. And then the counter is pointing out if it doesn't, if there are products that are saying that they are GitOps conformant or they follow the principles but don't, also talking about those out there in public. And Tracy, I think you unmuted, and sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. I apologize.
Scott has his hand raised.
Hey, I wasn't actually sure quite how to do it because I actually volunteered to be moderator, but I came late. So I think did someone step in for moderator while I was
Yep, I'm doing my best to do that.
Oh, you're doing great. I just
But
didn't know.
let's, let me interject really quickly here. Let's go ahead. We are having a very lively discussion where others are wanting to jump in. Let's raise hands so that we can give everybody a chance to have a voice in this and not just the person who's the most aggressive, i.e. me. So Scott, please.
Okay, great. Quickly, the issue is kind of getting conflated a little bit. So I created this separate issue. Oops. Let me, I linked it in the doc, but just a moment here. Issue number 64, but here it is. I'll paste it in the Zoom link for easy access. Essentially, it is a proposal to rename. I don't want to spiral and expand this so that's why I made it separate. But I know we had discussed this in a former GitOps working group meeting, I think the last one, and it was met generally with unilateral enthusiasm. The main thing is that there are two entities really, and they have a relationship. Currently, they're named the same thing because we just kind of didn't plow ahead, but went ahead and applied for a sandbox project and it was accepted. And it's currently the same name as the working group. So the working group is an entity that is separate. They're different. They're not totally separate. The same people are working. Essentially, the working group is in service of the sandbox project. So the working group is under, it is defined as a short-lived working group under CNCF SIG apps delivery. And the sandbox project is an independent project, a top-level project in CNCF, currently in sandbox state. Just in case this is unclear to anyone on the call, maybe it's totally 100% clear. But the reason that matters, they could have the same name. In fact, they do right now. There's nothing stopping it. The reason I was suggesting renaming it is so that there's some more clarity which we're talking about when we're talking about each. And so far, it seems like everybody's on board for that. I threw out the name GitOps Initiative, not because I think it's a very sexy name, just to get the conversation started. I don't think anybody's really super excited about that name. But we don't really have to discuss it a whole lot here. But I think that some of the points that were brought up in respect to that when it came up in the logo conversation really matter. So one is, I think, Shlomo, your point, I think is very good that I mean, you made several points, but one that I think is really good is that we ought to start with what the criteria are for essentially what the goals of that project are. There are some stated goals currently. It's a work in progress, but I think that that's correct. In terms of who should defend the logo, that's really not us, that's CNCF. CNCF already has a process set up for that.
The CNCF has gone the badges route for certifying people. So the logo may be used, and then after they go through and do a bunch of stuff, they'll do the badge route.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm working with Paris too on some of the badges conversation stuff, which is kind of fun and interesting if anybody else is interested in getting involved there. Excuse me, but I just wanted to kind of separate those, try to make that a little bit clear, and why that proposal is out there. So far, people have given different ideas, but we've got that open discussion so that we can do that there. I just want to mention one thing is that I'm pretty sure Alexis isn't here, right? Yeah.
No, he's not.
Yeah. So we had a conversation about this the other day, and also and Cornelia and I did too, about one of his suggestions was very similar to what Shlomo said, is that we should start, if I understood what you said correctly, Shlomo, there, is that we should make a list of things that might live on, and that's what should be in the project. So that's the manifesto, for lack of another word, or the principles, let's just say, this any specification that might come out of this, like a testing compatibility kit similar to Java's thing. Whatever it is, again, just ideas, whatever that happens to be, conformance and certification, stuff like that. And so that can be within the scope of the project. That's a long-lived thing. And the working group's goal is to help all of us and everyone involved in the working group, the goal of this is to help ensure that we help to set that project up for success. And the working group will not stay around forever, but members of the working group could continue to be members of the project. So I hope that's clear. And working groups do not need a logo, but the reason that I suggested in that logo conversation that we keep the working group and the project as separate versions is because it just might be fun, but there's no other reason for the working group to have a logo.
All
So
right,
that's
we
all I
have
want.
a few people with their hands up. Henrik, I think, had his first, and then Tony after Henrik, and then Shlomo, looks like you have your hand up after Tony.
And
So,
as a point of chairing the meeting, I'm going to interject and say I'd like to call time on the logo conversation in about 2 minutes, because we do have a pretty full agenda. And thank you for pointing it out. I hope I'm not butchering your name, but Engine, that we have other very important things to talk about today. And so let's do a couple more minutes on this topic, and then we'll move on to the next topic, if that's okay. So, and correct, I think Henrik was the next person with his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to comment on the logo thing. I think we're slightly conflating two different things. There's one about the logo and how we defend the logo, which is going to be really hard unless it's trademarked. And then the other part of that is the compatibility compliance thing, which is easier to defend. And there are many examples on how we can set up some, if we do get to the compliance suite, what is needed to be allowed to show that badge of compliance. I think we should separate the logo selection and what to do with the logo with how we do compliance and how we can enforce the use of that.
Any last comments on the logo conversation? Tony, did you have something on the logo?
It just, maybe the last thing is it possible to make not a logo, but the name? I think the name should be decided first and then the logo. Is it possible to have, to put a time frame on this, or because my impression was after last meeting that the naming has been decided. I mean, I was under the impression that initiative is the suffix, but apparently it's not, right? So maybe we can write the definition and time box it in the issue or in the discussion.
Yep, I like that suggestion of let's settle on the name, then we settle on the logo, and we time box both, so that the conversation doesn't go on forever. Shlomo, what I've seen in the past for logos is that there's some period where people are posing suggestions, and then all the suggestions are put on one page and everybody gets to vote in the GitHub issue. So that sounds like a really good process. So I think that unless there's objections, let's work on the name for the project. Then we will work on the logo, time boxing each one of them, and then we'll close out this issue. Okay, then moving on to the next thing on our agenda. Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you as a discussion about the GitOps principles.
Great, I'll be a little quicker this time. I just wanted to update people on that PR. In fact, I'll link it in a moment, so I'm not multitasking here while I say it. But if someone else wants to link to that PR for those listening, that would be awesome. Let me put my hand down here. Yeah, so basically that had been on hold for just a little while, not out of lack of interest or fizzling out or anything like that, but primarily Brice and I were collaborating on that as a starting point for the group. We started in a collaborative markdown editor. I don't know if how many of you have used hackmd.io, probably most of you, but if you haven't, that's where we started it. Moved it to a PR on Brice's branch, and then I think people who were in the past meetings remember this. We decided at a certain point that should be fine going public. There was a little misunderstanding there, but then, Brees did open that publicly, or a little more publicly, let's say, more discoverably, in this repo. And since then, there's been a lot of discussion. And a bunch of the discussion points are, hey, this thread is getting pretty long. Should we split it up, or should we do something different? Should we have public working sessions, etc.? I have been working on other priorities that have just resolved themselves as of this morning. Yesterday, I went through that issue and replied to all of the open comments, as well as made a suggestion that we go ahead and have a co-working session by moving the current stat. Yeah, not really self-resolving. It took a whole team of people to do it, but yeah, that was fun. But the idea is that we have a co-working session that can be more real time, so there can be progress by people who are interested. It doesn't exclude folks who cannot make that co-working session. We could have more than one, but I suggest we don't really for now, for the first version, that we have a milestone to set a pre-release version that's added, and it's explicitly work in progress still, that can be iterated upon, but it can't just simply be merged as is and then iterated upon in further PRs. 60 something comments is not even close to a maximum or unheard of for important pull requests. They often get into the hundreds. So this is not unusual for those kind of feeling antsy about using this in GitHub. GitHub is not great for real-time discussions. It is great for async. So the idea is we have a real-time one. We move this back to HackMD. Those who want to comment there can comment there. That will be saved for posterity too. We can link back to it in the PR. So the goal of that will be to move the changes that are agreed upon back into the PR with proper comments and proper co-authorship added in those commits. Does anyone have an objection to that? A strong, objection or opinion there?
So I have my hand raised for not that I have an objection, I just have a question. How does it work going the other direction, right? So like if someone makes a comment in this PR, or they do something in this PR, how does it make it way back to the HackMD?
Well, what we would do is we would, for the short-lived co-working session, which could be for an hour, could be for, I don't know, 2 hours or something like this. I don't really know yet, but just an idea that we would essentially take what's in the PR, or the comments in the PR, and that will be the starting point. Any further comments that might go into that PR during that co-working session, we can discuss them, but nothing else will be merged into that PR. No code suggestions will be merged back until after the co-working session, because otherwise it'll just be kind of, what's the source of truth here? We're essentially temporarily switching. We're putting the source of truth, which is the PR, on pause, having a breakout room, kind of, as if we were all in the same room with paper, and then we come. It's just we could do it in a Google Doc, but it's just not. It's pretty inferior to something that focuses on Markdown if that's the end goal. So that's the only.
That was clear. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that was my that was my concern, is like, what's the source of truth? But that makes sense now. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I was muted. Shlomo,
Yeah.
you have your hand up on this topic?
Yeah, I think I originally requested the online, let's work together on this. My main problem was I just couldn't follow what is kind of latest and what am I supposed to be responding to in the GitHub issue. And that's why I actually stopped looking at it and stopped responding to it. Besides that, I had the feeling that many of the discussions were on a very, very detailed level that kind of do not fit the 0.1.0 version of the principles. I think we should be a bit more daring and say, okay, let's do like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 as a maybe more rapid chain of iterations than really spending so much time on turning each and every word for exactly this 0.1 version. You know, like early release happens. Let's have an online session, hash it out, and then there will be 0.1. And then people can give qualified feedback, and it will lead to a 0.2 and so on. I think that will be more effective than spending so much time on a single revision.
Yep. I'm going to call on myself with my hand. I just want to +1 what Shlomo said around one of the struggles that I was having with the discussion in the Git issue is that I have a very, very difficult time from a visual perspective being able to see the context of the entire document with the discussion, you know, stuck in between in the way that it's done in the GitOps style. And so while I like the suggestion of moving over to HackMD for a working session, and that makes sense, there's also just this visual element. I'm having a very, very difficult time parsing that and seeing that context. And I don't know whether we have something that can solve that problem or whether I just have to get with the program and learn how to parse that myself better.
Hi. So I agree with everyone. So I think that we should have a breakout session, and I think we should go in iterations, but I think those iterations should be small rather than large. So rather focus on very high level concepts and principles that everybody agrees upon, things that everybody has consensus on. You go into 0.1 and then you iterate on each one of those principles, and you refine it over time, asynchronously, principle by principle. Because I think what we're doing now is we're trying to refine the low-level details of principles, and I think that's kind of perhaps where we're getting unstuck.
I keep muting. Scott, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I agree with what was just said. With one exception, I don't believe we should publish. I don't believe we should commit these to the main branch if it's just a single principle. I do not think that that's. I think it's better to wait until we have something that we want to publish. It doesn't mean it has to be perfect. But at least at the high level, as you said, they should be what we want to say, even if it's a pre-release of what, you know, and if that means that this is something we talked about yesterday, or I talked about with Cornelia yesterday, but if that means that there are controversial or items that remain controversial within this pull request, we could omit that. We could certainly omit those with the goal of a 0.1.0. Absolutely. And if there are lots of nitpicking things, just exclude that for now. We can always open a separate, you know, move those commits to a separate PR, you know, pare it down a bit, make sure that we are publishing only what we agree upon, and then iterate further. If that solves some of the concerns that have come up, comment in the thread. I would love that. Oh, I'm sorry, since no one started again yet, and I haven't put my hand down yet. Someone else had asked about milestones and things like this, and how we're going to work forward. My suggestion was I'm planning to open a project, a GitHub project in the GitHub, the GitOps working group repo that focuses on the principles themselves. So we can add note cards there. We can add any relevant issues and PRs, and we can form whatever plan we need and tie them to whatever milestones we agree upon.
Cool. Tony?
I'm just wondering, I mean, this is a working group, right? The Git repo is called working group. Why are we afraid of putting it on the main branch or whatever master? Because it's a working thing. It's called 0.1 one. So what are we afraid of? I mean, it's a work in progress piece, not software, but document. I just wonder what the quality criteria is. But yeah. But maybe
So,
just
so I
making
threw
the
my
breakout
hand up.
session.
I threw my hand up to respond to that. I feel like there is absolute value to people who are not part of the working group being able to go to the working group repository and saying, I would like to understand what has been agreed to by the working group and what is still being discussed. Both are completely transparent, but it would be valuable, I think, to have a very simple place to go to and say, and we could use releases. We could use the release mechanism to indicate this is what we've agreed on, or we could use a branching mechanism. But I think I would suggest that it would be very valuable to have a very clear way for visitors to understand this is what the working group has agreed to, and this is what is still work in progress. And so whatever mechanism we use, I think that we need to have that.
But isn't this called pull request? I mean, that's what we are talking about. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, then I make it quick. But isn't it called? I mean, we are here on GitOps, right? Isn't it called clear that what's not merged into some main branch is not consensus, and if it's in the main branch, it's like the current state. So it's, I mean, we should live Git if we call ourselves GitOps working group, right? But yeah.
Yeah, and I almost think that was the suggestion, was that things get merged into the main branch once they've been agreed upon. Christian?
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. It never moves, but I always try to find it. I just want to plus one what Cornelia said right there. I think there's value in showing the what we've agreed on and versus what we're still discussing. And I think we're saying the same. We're all saying the same thing. So, but I think that what still is kind of like in the errors being discussed should be tracked on a different, either a different branch or as a PR or something. However we do it, I do see the value in showing what has been agreed upon already. So however that process is, I think I'm agnostic to how the process works. So anyways, I was just plus one what Cornelia said.
Cool. Okay. So do we need to do anything else with respect to perhaps we use the Slack channel to try to schedule a synchronous working session on this? Is that the way we want to proceed on that? I think I heard generally people nodding that, yeah, having some synchronous collaboration would be good. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so I was just going to take on that task of coordinating folks asynchronously. And yeah, Slack, there's also, it's already proposed, it's already suggested in this comment on the GitHub issue. So people are not excluded from replying there. But I would think Slack is probably the best way.
Okay.
Yeah, either way, once we get some ideas of some times that would work generally time zone-y for most people, then we can throw out some ideas and not make it a super lengthy process, but just as long as it's good for most people, then we can get there.
Sounds good. Moshe?
Yeah, so I think we should set up like a regular scheduled session for this until we call the principles done, because I think it will, I think the synchronous communication will help a lot in working out those finer details. So I think it would help maybe once every 2 weeks, you set up an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it is, and have that on everybody's diaries and have a regular breakout session, and then close that breakout session when we hit 1.0.
+1.
And then Doodle works quite well for voting on meeting times. You set that up and you send out a link that anybody can sign up to and put their vote for multiple times, and then it collates the results of that vote.
Cool. All right, I'm going to step up as chair for this particular meeting and say last call for any discussions. I think we've made some decisions in terms of how we progress. I don't think that I don't think there were any objections to, we need to have some mechanism to differentiate between what we've agreed upon and what is still work in progress. I will suggest that the team that gets together just make the decision on whether we use PRs for the work in progress and or branches, or let them work out that, just so long as it's very clear to visitors that there's a difference between what's been agreed to and what is still work in progress. And I think that we also decided that we are going to have some synchronous meeting times. So those are some decisions we made. If there's any objections, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next topic on the agenda. Okay, excellent. So the next topic on the agenda is something that I put just a quick note out in the Slack channel on. If you haven't seen it, I'll just quickly summarize here. Weaveworks, but this is not a Weaveworks event. We just, at the very last minute, 2 days left, said, hey, how about, would it make sense to do a GitOps con? And so I sent out a note to the Slack channel and said, what do y'all think? I thought it was pretty exciting. And so I think there were no objections. There were quite a number of people who said, oh, what a great idea. So it's a 0-day event right before KubeCon. And there was a fee that needed to be paid. And then there are all of the logistics around producing the event, streaming the event, and so on. After we sent out that note, Christian spoke up and said, Red Hat would love to co-sponsor. So it's just a sponsorship. It is not that we are putting on the events, it's a sponsorship. And so, for example, Red Hat has kindly stepped up to doing all of the production for us. So arranging the streaming channels and all of those mechanics. Christian's and all of our industry colleague, Chris Short, who does a lot of this stuff, has kindly agreed to help us produce this. So that's really fantastic. What I want to suggest here is that there were a number of people who responded in the Slack channel. I will go ahead and create an issue in GitHub for this so that we can have a place to record things there as well. But there were a number of people who spoke up in the Slack channel who said, yep, I would love to help in any way I can. So I will create that issue in the GitHub repository and have folks officially volunteer there. And then I would love to have that group of volunteers come together and actually, what we are doing is that the GitOps working group are the ones who are putting on this event. So from my perspective, that means that they are issuing the call for papers, because this is not just the GitOps working group presenting, this is a community event. There's a call for papers that they commit to reviewing those papers, forming a schedule. And then again, we can depend on Chris Short and the Red Hat team for production. And then any organization that wants to get in on the marketing around this and so on, that's something else that the group would need to coordinate. So how does social media happen against this, and what are those types of things? So that's my suggestion. We have just a few minutes where we can have live discussion around this. But from a process perspective, I think that's what I would propose is let's create a GitHub issue, and we'll continue working on that there. See a thumbs up. No raised hands. Okay. All right, I will go ahead and do that. So I have a second action item.
Tomo has hands up.
Oh, somebody has their hand up? Oh, yes, Shlomo, yes, please.
Do you need anything at the current stage, or it's essentially everything already covered and we just need to find people who want to put in the work to get things done?
It's the latter. That's what we need now. And I do believe that it's quite urgent because the event is only 2 months away. There was a deadline, and by getting in on that deadline, it will now show up in the registration. So, you know, if you've registered for KubeCon, there is a page where it comes to the day 0 events. And it should be showing up there. I haven't looked since then, but it should be showing up there now because, again, we made it in just under the wire to get listed on that page. So people can start to register for it. But in order to promote registration, having a bit more of a, you know, a GitOps working group endorsed description of what it is that we're going to do. So that would be like the first high level thing is like, let's describe what this is going to be. And then the sooner that we can get the call for papers out, the better. So there is some urgency because we're less than 2 months away from the event. But yes, it's all the work of putting on this event.
I'll ask tomorrow if I can take time for that.
Okay. Leonardo?
So just a quick question, but on the previous meeting, we organized the website committee as well. And I'm guessing it would be relevant to have some sort of online presence available by the 0-day event. And I don't think we've gotten much of that started. So kind of just bringing this to the surface, because I think this also becomes relevant.
Do we need a place for the web? Do we have a place for the web team where they're doing their work? Do we have an issue or a?
I don't think there's anything. Last that we spoke about this, it was on the GitOps working group general channel, and it was mentioned just as the principals has a Slack channel that one would be open for the website working group, but I think that's kind of like where it ended. I don't think, at least from my perspective, and I'm one of the people in that committee, I haven't seen other activity going on.
Okay, so is that the blocker? Do we need to create that Slack channel? And then those folks who volunteered for that committee should be, you know, autonomous and able to do their work.
I think that's all that's needed. Some sort of kind of like ownership and coordination. And I think who was it that was kind of like leading that effort? The guy from CodeFresh, what's his name? I forget.
Dan Garfield.
Dan, yeah. So yep. I was kind of like, I guess, kind of like, I'm gonna say waiting for kind of like some path from Dan, but I'm pretty sure we have a Slack channel we can self-organize. After all, the principals committee has been pretty much like very autonomous, right? We just had a place to communicate. I think that might be enough to get started.
I'll be happy to take the action item to work with Amy to get that Slack channel set up, and then I'll send a note out to the broad Slack channel of its existence. Jeff.
Yeah, +1 on that too. I know that Dan was going to be running that. We talked about potential domains to use as well. So I'm not sure we're at any of that list. So I couldn't take my hand in fast enough. Leonardo, I think, said that perfectly. Okay,
cool. All right, we are in the final moments of the meeting, and I see one other thing on the agenda, which has unsolved list, but there's no name associated with that. So I don't know who put that on the agenda. Does anyone want to claim that?
So I created the unsolved issue, but I think we it can probably be discussed as part of a round 2 principles discussion or something like that.
Okay. All right. Any other business then?
I think next meeting, we should, I think we're making it a thing that it's the second Thursday in the month at exactly this time, which would be 1800 GMT. So that would put us at the next meeting at April 8th, if that works for everybody.
And I nominate Scott to be the moderator.
I'll take it again. Next time I'll be on time.
That's the week after
I was happy to
Easter.
step in today, but
Sorry,
ahead,
that's the
Shlomo.
week. That's the week after Easter, where probably lots of people will be on holiday. At least here in Germany, where typically schools are closed.
Let me check, because that may also be Passover week.
I know that because the week before is Passover, and then is Easter, and then the Easter vacations, where we obviously go on holiday. That's why I knew about that.
Yes, I don't know if I think at least here in the States, the school break is the week prior, so the week of Passover and Good Friday. So I don't know if we keep it,
It
or
varies.
if
It varies by region. It
Yeah,
varies
varies
by
by
region.
region.
It's wildly different. Spring break is not always Easter. It's all over spring.
I mean,
what's the vote for people here to keep it on the 8th or to?
I'd say third week then, because with the first 2 weeks being holidays and potential kids being off, it'll be tough for everybody to join.
So that would be tax day, at least in the US, April 15th. Does that work for everybody? Any objections?
I
right.
I only I raised my hand to pick for this topic. So is there a link to an ICS that we can subscribe to?
That's a great idea. Not yet.
Okay, yeah.
If you go to the if you go to the CNCF calendar, it is in the CNCF calendar, and there are links. I did not look for an ICS. I looked for an add to Google Calendar, which is a link that does exist. The other may exist as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because that's what I've been doing. I've been just kind of just add to calendar. It'd be nice to be able to subscribe to like a central calendar, and if it moves, then
yeah.
It just moves on my calendar, right?
Yep. Tony?
Yeah, I just want to say that the website Slack channel now exists. If you haven't
thank you.
followed
Done.
Yeah, just done.
Awesome. Okay. So Daniel, are you gonna take the action item to get that broadcast or possibly changed? I don't know whether we can change that on the CNCF calendar. I would hope so. We can change one thing, but you want to circle back with Amy and see how?
I'll create the .md and the PR in the repo. I'm not sure who updated the calendar the last time. I think
It's
I
Amy.
don't have access to it. Amy, so I can send her an
It's
email.
Amy. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are exactly at the top of the hour, so I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you. A very, very productive meeting today, and lots of work to continue on after this. So thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a wonderful
Okay.
day. Thank
You
you,
too.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.